Welcome to the Verified Athletics Podcast. At verifiedathletics.com, we got a new article coming out that showed the differences between the different divisions. I learned quite a bit, helping to write the article, so there's great information for someone that knows nothing about the differences, but even for experts to learn a little bit more. Plus, it's all free, so go to verifiedathletics.com to check it out. Our guest today is Mike Neale. Mike played football at JUCO in Southern California called Grossmont College before playing 1AA, which is now FCS, at Missouri State. And he's now the head coach at Whittier College in LA, which is taking over a program that has not won a game in a while. But Mike himself has really only won one game in 3 seasons there. So I still believe that he'll turn it around, and those results show how hard of a job that actually is. So I think you'll enjoy the podcast. Here it is. All right, we got Mike Neale on the podcast. Welcome. How are you?
Doing great, Nate. Thanks for having me today.
So Mike is currently the head coach at a Division III school in Los Angeles, or just outside of Los Angeles, Whittier College. Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're at now and how you got there?
Yeah, so Whittier College, we're, as you said, a Division III school. We play in the SCIAC, which is made up of 8 teams out here in Southern California, all in LA and Orange County, and some great academic institutions, and have a great history of football as well. Most of us have been playing football for over 100 years. So a great combination of obviously the geographical advantage being here in Southern California, but top-notch education and then some really competitive football as well. And got here after prior to here being at Albright College out there where you and I met back in 2007, and excited to be back here in Southern California at a great place.
And that's where you're from too, Southern California, right?
Yes, I was born and raised in San Diego, and obviously coaching takes you wherever, so you can't always control where you're at, but certainly glad to be back here. And here we are in December, and we got 70 degrees and sunny outside.
Is that a part of the recruiting pitch? You get a lot of guys that are not from California, and that's a pull for them, or is it really mostly just recruiting guys locally anyway?
We stay pretty local, and we primarily focus on the state of California. We'll get into southern Nevada, and then we'll also get out into western Arizona as well. We're branching out a little bit into Texas and Hawaii this year, as well as the Pacific Northwest, getting up to Oregon and Washington. But I think certainly if there's a place, and certainly weather's never a number one reason for people to choose a school, I would hope, but it's definitely a good addition, no doubt about it.
And how do you decide what areas you're going to recruit? How do you come to that decision?
Yeah, so California, obviously, everywhere in the country is recruiting Southern California, so it's our backyard, so to speak. And certainly the focus for us is keeping guys here in Southern California. A lot of great talent, obviously, and something as well from a financial situation, being a Division III school that obviously cannot offer athletic scholarships. We have the California State Grant here as well. So California residents can get an additional, I don't know what the exact number will be for this upcoming year, but it's going to be around $9,000 to $9,500 this year for going to school in the state, which is a pretty big chunk of change that certainly helps out with the financial portion of things.
Yeah, and how much does Whittier cost for your athletes?
Total ticket, right about $63,000. That's room, board, tuition fees, everything it costs to be a student here.
So that probably impacts who you're recruiting, I would imagine, then.
Yeah, it does. Now, that being said, guys can get a big chunk of change taken right off the top academically. That's the easiest way for them, regardless of what their need may be, for them to get a big chunk of the finance taken off, is to do the job academically. And so that's really a big focus for us, is finding those guys who are academically qualified to be a student here and earn a degree in 4 years.
Yeah, and I think a lot of athletes don't realize that is, I think what I'm hearing you say is, if they're rich, like then that gives you a lot of possibilities, right? Because then the cost thing isn't a deal breaker. But otherwise, if they don't have, even if you could get someone into school, if they don't have good enough grades to get serious academic scholarship money, you probably don't even waste your time starting to recruit them.
Absolutely. No, you're spot on with that, because it's something where the cost of living out here is obviously a little bit more than many parts of the country as well, depending on where someone's from. But so even a family that on paper is making a good income, it is not enough perhaps for them to go to college and certainly pay what the cost of tuition is at a number of colleges. So the academically qualified candidate and prospect is huge for us.
And what's near the minimum of like an athlete that you could get into school regardless of the money, like take the money part out of it. Where's like the bottom of the line there?
The average incoming freshman here at Whittier has a 3.5 GPA. We'll probably dip down as low as a 3.2 for a guy, but he's got to be a dude at that point because that's kind of the lowest end that we can get a guy in with.
Okay, and then what does it take to get a scholarship or to get like an academic scholarship?
Yes, so anywhere above that 3.2 or above, he'll be able to qualify for some amount of academic merit-based scholarship the majority of the time. Obviously, I don't work in the admissions office, so I can't control that. But that being said, it's something where those guys are usually getting some amount of money, and certainly the higher his GPA is, the more money he qualifies for.
Right, and you can tell me how it is at Whittier, but from what I remember, it's like it could be like over the course of 4 years, $100,000 or more difference between someone that's say close to a 4.0 and someone that is closer to a 3.0. It could really be that much of a difference.
Oh, absolutely. Our top scholarship is over $30,000, and they're still setting the number right now, but I believe it's going to be somewhere around the $32,000 per year scholarship, merit based, and then the lowest is $6,000. So huge difference right there.
Yeah, I think like there's no part-time job that could justify the amount of time that you're going to spend on that. If you just spent that time as a student athlete on getting better grades, the amount of money that you would make from that would crush your minimum wage waitress or waitering job or whatever it is that you're doing, working at
Oh,
a Cold
absolutely.
Stone.
Yeah, delivering pizza, you got it.
So, well, cool. And so you've been out at Whittier for 3 years now,
Correct.
and I know the situation there, but I feel like it'd be good for you to tell me what you think it's like there in the football program and the history, what you walking into, how things are going.
Sure. Well, Whittier College, we've been playing football for 109 seasons now, and great history, a lot of tradition, a lot of success. We actually have 26 conference championships in the SCIAC that we play in, a lot of proud alums who've achieved a lot of great things on the field and more importantly off the field once they left here. However, we haven't had a great deal of success on the football field in recent years, and obviously that's why a change was made, and I was brought here 3 years ago, almost exactly right now. And as it was, really inherited a program that was just kind of in need of a whole culture change. So we came on board and got after it and inherited a pretty small roster and some guys that were great guys, but not necessarily had been subjected to what a typical college football routine was with a lot of structure. And so we had to really just implement and get everything rolling the way we wanted it. And I think we're in a good place now to turn the corner and get things going.
And I would think that if when you're coming in and you're bringing in a new way of doing things, I would think that you probably get a mixed reaction from different players. There's probably some players that are not, it's maybe not what they signed up for. They signed up for the program that they were recruited into, and that's what they were expecting. And there's probably like another group of players that they are tired of losing and wanting change and willing to listen to someone with some new ideas because whatever the old ideas are don't seem to be working. Is that how you experience it?
Yeah, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. Most of the guys, when I got here, fell into one of those two extremes. There were a couple who were just in the middle, I'd say, who just were good with whatever. But I think there were certainly some guys who were just tired of the way things had been going, the losing, and wanting to get after it, whether it be from developing themselves as people, as students, or as athletes, and embrace the change. And then, like you said, there were some guys who they're like, man, I just like showing up and playing the games on Saturday. I was perfectly happy the way things were. And so we actually trimmed the roster quite a bit that first spring when we got here. And really, we didn't cut anyone. It was all just guys who weren't fully committed to the college football student athlete process.
Right. They wanted the thing that they had, right?
Yes.
Probably to some level. And they weren't ready for the change. And I think it's probably best that they part ways. Now, do those guys, do they mostly stay at school or do they find another program that fit them?
The majority, I would say, stayed at school here. Obviously, I don't keep in touch with those guys once they leave the program, but I see some of them around campus still.
And how quick is that? Like, you come in and you say, "This is the new way we're going to do things." Is it someone hears that and they're like, "I'm out. I'm not interested," or is it more so that they're kind of willing to try it, and then when they realize, "Oh, that's what it feels like to actually work at the level that it takes to compete at the college level, then that's when it sinks in and like just not interested.
Yeah, it wasn't like immediate, say after the first meeting when I outlined what we were going to implement and how we were going to change things. And I think everyone's on board until they're not. You know,
Yeah.
it sounds really good, and everyone says, "Yeah, I can do that. This is going to be great." And then it's the getting up every morning and getting to the weight training for the first time, 4 days a week, early morning, and then implementing all the other things that we do from a personal development, in addition to, of course, the spring practice structure. And all of a sudden, it just dwindled uh, as the semester went on here, our first spring.
So how many athletes did you start with when you came in, and how many did you have returning for the start of actual camp the next year?
Yeah, when I got here, I'd say first meeting, one of the first things I did was meet with each player individually. We were in about the mid 40s, if I remember correctly. The numbers right in front of me. And then by the end of that spring, we were down to 29. And then, of course, we were recruiting as soon as we got here as well, and shortened recruiting season for us, obviously coming in and took over really right around Christmas of 2015 for the class of 2016 there. So we were behind a little bit from a timing standpoint, but we're still able to piece together a pretty good class, guys who are our current juniors, rising seniors for us right now. But we were able to get, I think it was around 40. So we came into camp with somewhere around 65 guys that first fall of 2016.
Okay. And for people that don't know, that's probably about 40 less than most of the other Division three schools. Does your conference have any sort of limits, or what are you guys normally seeing on across the sideline when you're playing against the other teams in your conference?
There aren't any limits. Now, our conference is kind of twofold. We have some schools, I'd say about half the schools are somewhere around that 60 to 75 roster spot. And then about half of the schools are somewhere over 100, probably 100 to 125. So it's kind of some teams that have the large rosters, the triple digits, and some that are around the 60 to 75.
What do you think drives those differences between those two sets of schools?
I think some of it is admissions based, some of it's school based as well, as far as the population of the school. And as I said, some schools are perhaps a little more selective than others academically as far as how many freshmen they're allowing into campus that year. And so that turns to a smaller number for that football program as well.
And do you think there's a relationship between the schools that have more players on the team and the ones that sit at the top of the standings at the end of the season?
You know what? It's an interesting question because I think within our conference and you've had different champions almost every year here. And certainly the 3 seasons I've been here, we've had 3 different conference champions. And a couple of the teams that have won have been those teams at around the 100 mark or over. And then this year we actually had a champion that was like us from a roster standpoint, much lower. And there's been a lot of turnaround within the conference, which is exciting from a coaching standpoint. Teams that have truly gone from worst to first or somewhere in the middle and won the championship the next year. So it's something that I think anyone can do in our conference. It's a little bit unique.
Yeah, that is definitely different. It's certainly different than what you see. You don't expect Alabama to be last place in the SEC next year. So,
Right. Absolutely.
but no, that makes total sense. And I find a lot of Division three schools, they're kind of divided up into two categories. One are schools that football is like a driver for admissions, and admissions wants more football players, and other Division three schools, and I think a lot less of them, but there are still some that are wanting to put the brakes on the football team. They want to have a football team for whatever reason, for the school, probably because of alumni and other things. Um, but admissions is like capping you at a certain number of athletes per year because they only have so many spots. Where First of all, like, is that how you see it? And then second, where do you guys stand on that spectrum?
Yeah, I think that's fairly accurate, Nate. You do have some of those schools that they're just bringing as many guys as you possibly can and bring in 60, 70, 80, 90 guys, and we'll take them all. And that's perhaps why some schools have football or some other sports like lacrosse, which are a lot of times you get your Division three schools, private, smaller schools, and it's tough for them sometimes to get that male enrollment. So they add football, they add lacrosse, and they think, hey, that's going to add 30, 40, 50 guys a year, whatever it may be. And then you have those ones, like you said, that they're just academically, hey, look, we have football. That's great. The alums like it. We know it adds value to our campus. And we're only going to be able to admit this many, though, because of how competitive we are academically. I'd say we're kind of somewhere in the middle, where certainly our admissions office and our school, we're a little unique. We're the smallest population in our conference. We're around 1,700 students is kind of our max capacity. That being said, we have 22 NCAA sports. And so about 1 out of 3 students here are student athletes. So certainly our campus, our student body, our administration, our admissions office all value athletics for not only what it adds to the school culture, but from an admissions standpoint as well. Certainly a big tool to help attract people here, but also very selective as far as who we admit.
Is that a selling point for you guys on the recruiting trail with like saying that 1 out of every 3 athletes or students as an athlete, that like you're kind of in this student athlete culture? I mean, I imagine that that drives a lot of what it's like to be on campus.
Yeah, I think it's very helpful because you know that you're going to be around a lot of people, both male and female, who have similar interests, who are excited about not just going to school and getting a great education, but about the athletic piece of it. And so you have, no matter who your roommate is or who's next door to you in the dorms or whatever else, there's a good chance they're an athlete. They understand and respect what you're going through each week academically and athletically and all the demands that you have that some of those general population students don't have.
And I want to go back to trying to turn a program around, which has been your mission since you've been there. And you said like we're gonna change. You walked in, you say we're gonna change the way things are. This is the new way of doing things. This is gonna get us to where we want to be. And you get some guys dropping out. You get some guys that are buying in and pushing on it. And then your first season, I know you guys didn't win a game, right?
Right.
And
Correct.
then like you haven't had that push of success. Is it become harder and harder to maintain the message that says trust me, follow me, this is the way to do it, we will get there? It's 19-year-old kids, like it's hard to keep them believing. So like tell me about that. Is that a struggle? How do you work through that?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's something that we're certainly aware of because obviously everyone's goal is to be 1-0 on any given Saturday, right? And so whether you're 1-0 or 0-1 that day, you want to wake up the next day, refresh it, and get after it the next week. But certainly you got to be aware of a message becoming stale if the results aren't there, because ultimately that's what we're all judged on and what everyone wants to have happen. So it's something I think really starts with surrounding yourself with the right people, both from a coaching staff as well as a player standpoint, and recruiting the right people who will continue to get after it regardless of what it is. Because as you know, winning's great. However, it can also oftentimes cover up some stuff. When we've all been involved in as many games as we've been in, that you win some games that you come away feeling bad about, and you lose some games where you say, you know what, we made some progress when you get the result we wanted. So it's about finding the right guys, and I think that's something that we've really been honing in on here.
And how would you describe, you said finding the right guys, how would you describe those right guys? What are they like?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's something I think every school that you're at, you have to kind of find the guy who's not just a right fit for you from a football standpoint, but also the right fit for the school because it's different. Every school has their own requirements and has their own things that kind of students who fit in best and culturally who fits in best and different settings, all that stuff that goes completely separate from the football piece of it. So for us, we're looking for guys, like I said, are not only excited about getting a 4-year degree, but want to earn it here at Whittier. We're looking for guys, primarily our number one thing we're looking for is character, guys who are going to do the right thing and get after it all the time, kind of help develop that leadership within the locker room. Because certainly we spend a lot of time with our guys, obviously, as all coaches do, but we're not going to be around them 24 hours a day when they're at the lunch hall, when they're down in the weight room, when they're in the locker room, or when they're hanging out on the weekends. So we want guys who are going to continue to be great leaders, not just when we see them at practice or in the meeting room, but in everything that they do, and guys who honor a commitment. And we're looking for guys who want to make a 4-year commitment to Whittier College. As you know, it takes a rare type of young man who is going to show up freshman year and finish playing all 4 years of college football. It's an exception rather than the norm. So a 4-year commitment means a lot to us. It's something we're very clear about in the recruiting process. And when you find guys who are academically qualified, who have the character to stick with all the obstacles and hurdles that are no doubt going to present themselves every day, every year during their 4 years here as a student athlete. Those are the guys we get excited about. Those are our kind of guys, the guys who are going to be successful both on and off the field for us.
And I've worked at some schools that are higher academic schools and some schools that are not as high. This sounds like Whittier sounds like you're getting higher academic guys. I found that at those schools you got less knuckleheads, if that's what you want to call them, like guys that are just headaches, getting into trouble. You're always gonna have that. I mean, it's 100 college kids, right? They get into trouble, especially some percentage of them. So like, it's not like you get none, but you get less of them, and the ways in which they're getting in trouble seem to be less and less. Is that your experience, like compared to other places that you've coached?
Yeah, it's been outstanding. I have to say, I've had so few off-field incidents that I've had to address, whether it be even minor, major, anything in between. It's been, you can count them on one hand in the 3 years I've been here. So, again, it starts with people, and we've had some great young men here, and certainly I'm a big believer. Something we talk about a lot is how you do anything is how you do everything. So that guy who's doing a great job in the classroom, he's doing a great job on the field from a work ethic standpoint. He's doing a great job in life around the community, around the campus, and that's one of the things we talk about a lot with our guys. Is you don't just rare do you find the guy who is doing a great job academically, but then he's just a knucklehead off the field or out of the classroom, because he takes that same approach to everything that he does. So that's absolutely right. It's a great point.
And what does an athlete need to do to get on your guys' radar and for them to get recruited by you guys?
Yeah, so we have a number of ways. It'll start in the spring of that recruit's junior year. We'll start reaching out to coaches, doing some research on who are guys who should be on our list. And then we start inviting guys. We hold a couple camps over the summer as well. And the nice thing is, being where we're at, like I said, our primary recruiting base is here in Southern California. We do go up to Northern California as well, but then some of the neighboring states, whether it be Pacific Northwest, Nevada, Arizona. And so we get some guys on campus here, and we've had a great deal of success with some camps here that we've started the past couple of years, and getting a chance to see some of these guys. And then, of course, as we go through the season, we keep tabs. Each coach on our staff has roughly 100 to 150 schools that he's responsible for. So we keep tabs of guys throughout that and throughout that fall of their senior year, and certainly get some film from guys, and play, of course, email and phone tag with some of the high school coaches and who are guys who should be on our radar. And then we hit the road and meet those guys in person, which is where we're at right now here in December.
And so you would say the primary way that you're going to find out about an athlete is through their high school coach?
Yes. Yep. Primarily through the coach, or we bump into them at a camp.
Okay. And you guys work other like Division 1 camps to find guys? Is that typical for you?
Yeah, well, we host several camps. We've hosted one here with Boise State for the past 2 years, and then last year we started hosting one with Arizona State as well. So you get a lot of the satellite camps. Again, everyone's recruiting Southern California,
Right.
so there's no shortage of Division 1 schools that want to host a camp in Southern California. And with the new NCAA rules, they have to partner up with an NCAA host site. And so that's been a great tool for us.
And so is it hard to get those relationships? Because I imagine every school in your conference wants the Boise States and the Arizona States and whoever else to have them come to their school. How does that work?
Sure. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It literally every school in the West Coast, and many even going out to the Midwest, are hosting camps out here. And I think most of the schools within our conference are partnered up with one, if not many, schools that they do camps with. And I think it really comes down to which school you're partnering up with, how they want to do it. Some schools have many camps, maybe a shorter camp, just a couple hours, and have those several times throughout the summer. Some have more of your typical 4-hour camp or so, and just have one. And yeah, building those relationships, it's just kind of, you reach out to some schools or they reach out to you, and you find out what they're looking for, and if you can make it work. Fortunately, we have some great facilities here where we have our football stadium, which is obviously a turf field. And then right next to it, we have a grass field that has been our soccer field as well. So plenty of field space that we can utilize, and a pretty good location. We're in LA County, but we're right next to Orange County as well. We're just about a 5 minute down the road from being in Orange County. So locationally, I think we're in a great spot as well. Not too far west, not too far east, not too far north or south. We're kind of right in the middle.
I see. So it's just a matter of you like finding a school that you have what they need for their camp.
Yes, yep. And then, of course, you always bump into maybe someone on our staff knows someone on some other staffs as well, or you bump into some other coaches on the road through the recruiting process, and they say, "Hey, look, we're looking at having a camp," and so you just kind of explore that and see if you can make it work.
I see. So it usually goes the way of they reach out to you, or is it, or you proactively seeking them out?
Primarily, it's been schools reaching out to us or through a mutual connection.
Okay, interesting. And when you have the athletes come onto campus for camp, I imagine there's both going on, both two things going on. Number one, you're evaluating them. You're finding like guys that you think they might be there to see Boise State or Arizona State, but
Right,
you're looking at them and you're like, this is not a Boise State guy, not an Arizona State guy. Maybe they're a Whittier guy, and
right.
you're finding out who those guys are, adding names to your list, guys that you want to recruit. There's some of that going on, and then I'm sure there's some of the other thing going on, which is this is your opportunity to get lots of good football players on campus to show them that Whittier College, probably like for some of them, that it exists, right? And that we have football and we have a great staff and great facilities and all the other things. And so you're probably trying to do a little bit of a selling of your school to athletes when you have them on campus. Like you're using the Boise State or Arizona State name to draw them in, knowing that a lot of those guys are probably Whittier College guys, and you just you want to get them. So I imagine both those things are going on. How would you like divide up the percentage breakdown of like how much it's the first thing versus the second thing?
As far as like how many guys are there for the Division 1 schools versus us, you're saying, or
No, more like when you're like approaching your strategy to having these events,
yeah.
is your focus heavily on the first thing I said, heavily on the second thing I said, or like basically like a little bit of both, or like how would you describe it?
Yeah, no, it's certainly great to get people because, like you said, a lot of people may not even know that we're out here at Whittier College playing football. So to get people on campus is huge. And obviously, we're not going to be recruiting everyone who comes to our camp, but certainly it gives us a great amount of guys that we can find out some information after seeing them run, grab them, talk with them. We have a chance to coach them one-on-one. So our camps are pretty cool in that you get coached by, say, the Boise or Arizona State coaches, and then also by us as well. We're all coaching shoulder to shoulder, and it's a great way to find out how coachable a guy is, not just what he can move like, but how's he take to coaching. But I think it's extremely important too that even when if it's a guy who, say, one of the Division 1 schools are recruiting, when we go to campus to visit a prospect afterwards, in the winter as we're doing right now, to have even a guy who we're not recruiting who was at our camp and say, "Hey man, yeah, he was at our camp. Tell him about our campus." And now you can get that information from his buddy instead of just a coach who's pitching or selling or anything like that. So it works out great having guys on campus that we can then come back to on the road and have them be messengers about Whittier College having stepped foot on our campus.
Yeah, that's nice. What's the size of your typical recruiting class?
Wow, it's been all over. So ideally, I think, and it's been a little bit of kind of an experiment as we got here. And my first thought is, as you know, when we were coaching together there, Nate, we were bringing in some large classes all the time.
Yes.
And so being with our roster as small as it was when I got here, that was kind of my first response and my method of going about it. So we brought in a pretty large class a year ago, which was our first full recruiting class, the class of 2017. And it didn't exactly pan out from a retention standpoint. And I think a lot of times because we were wanting to get some bodies onto the team and of course guys who could help us athletically and it wasn't guys who were fully committed, and we found that out kind of the hard way. And so this past year we were much more selective. We brought in a much smaller class and still didn't get ideally I'd love to have that large roster, right? But we're going to build this thing a little slower than perhaps what I had planned when I got here, but build it the right way with the right people now. So I think a good class for us is right around that 35 to 40 range.
Okay. And of those 35 or 40, what percentage of them, or how many of them, either way, did you first discover at a camp at Whittier? Right, you didn't even know who they were until they came to Whittier.
Right. So I would say out of last year's class specifically, that was the year that we had both camps rolling. So our biggest camp year, we had three camps total. And I would say that we probably wound up with about five or six guys from the camp.
Okay, because
And
like,
and there were many other. I'd say there were probably maybe about 15 that we had actually visit us.
okay, because I do think that it's interesting how that evolves, and I think that that's not that common at a lot of Division III schools, where
Mhm.
that's where they're discovering their athletes. But it obviously is working that way for some. So I've often advised athletes that Division III schools and Division II schools are great to go to camps if you want coaching, if you want to actually like if you think that you might be interested in that school, it's a great way to actually experience it in a way that where you get to like work with the coaches, see if you fit with them, work in the facility, see if that feels right to you. And so like it can be really powerful as that, but it's is usually not the most efficient way and effective way to get on the radar of Division III coaches. I usually advise them to go to camps where they're going to get exposure to a lot of Division III coaches, because I think that that's just more effective. You're a Division III head coach. You probably have a better opinion on this than I do. What do you think?
Sure. Well, yeah, I think it's completely up to the individual and what they're looking for. There are, of course, camps where you can go and there's a ton of coaches at. Many times those camps are crowded with players as well. And so you wind up, and that's one of my biggest goals for our camps is that I want to make it the best experience possible for the two groups involved. Number one being the student athletes. I want them to walk away saying, man, that was a great camp. There were some takeaways that I'll be able to use this upcoming year that are going to help me be a successful football player. And then I also want for whatever other school we're throwing the camp with, I want for them to walk out of here and say, man, that was a great camp. We want to come back to Whittier next year. And so that's big for me. I want to be the most positive and great experience possible in a camp environment. And that's been accomplished from the feedback that I've gotten from our campers as well as our parents. And many times, I think the thing that really stands out to me is that the campers will say, "Oh man, this was awesome. I just went to name your camp, and I barely got any reps, because either the school only wanted to see a couple of guys, and I wasn't one of those guys, or there were just so many dudes that I was number 50 in line and I'd go get a rep and go back to the back of the line." So we've had some good numbers at our camps, but I think one of the things that's unique is that we make sure everyone's getting coached up individually and then gets plenty of reps.
Yeah, well, it's definitely good to get a camp. You know, even if you're gonna have a lot of athletes there, that you have to accept the fact that not every coach is gonna see every kid. Otherwise, you're gonna have 50-person lines. And I think if you're a Division III type player and you don't really know yet any schools or like think of them as being any different because you're kind of early on in the process, then just getting in front of like as long as this camp is set up well where you're just going to get a good look from say 10 of those coaches, even if there's 100 schools there, if you're going to just get a good look from 10 of them, that's pretty effective, I think.
Sure. No, absolutely. I think one of the things that's unique on the West Coast and where we're at here in Southern California is that there's not a lot of four-year football. You have, basically your Pac-12 teams. You have some Mountain West presence, and then you have Patriot League there with University of San Diego, and then outside of that, there's the eight of us here in the SCIAC, and that's about it. Humboldt State just dropped football. They're way up in Northern California. So it's another school here in California at the four-year level that dropped football. So you don't have, whereas perhaps in the Midwest and the East, you can have those camps and you wind up with 40 Division II and Division III coaches. And as you know, Nate, you and I have both worked those camps, and you get a ton of guys, and there's a lot of coaching going on. But that's just kind of something that doesn't happen out here just because there's not that many schools.
I see. That's interesting. You brought up like 4-year schools, so that leaves the open question of the 2-year schools. And do you guys recruit JUCOs?
We do. We do. It's something where you have to be selective about the guys that you're recruiting from there. I think a lot of times what happens is guys out here, and that's one of the things that you battle is a young man can choose to go to a junior college and quite literally, it'll be a couple $100 for him to go there. So it's, and you don't have to have any sort of academic requirements going in. Literally, again, all you have to do is be 18 or have a high school diploma, and you can get into a junior college here. And for California residents, actually, it can be free your first year even. So, from a price standpoint, if cost is truly the number one thing for a recruit, and he's not getting a full scholarship, he's one of the majority of football players out there in the country who's not on full scholarship, then junior college is certainly an avenue he can go. And we do look to recruit guys from there. That's something where we're looking to have more success with. We've gotten a couple per year. I'd like to get a few more. I think a lot of times you run into some guys who are choosing to go the junior college route because they have this vision in their head. Well, I'm a Division I player. I didn't have a Division I offer coming out of high school. I'll just go to junior college and then I'll have one. And oftentimes they're kind of D1 or bust. And those aren't our kind of guys. We want guys who love playing college football. They can't see themselves going to college without playing. And they also want to get the education, which is here. And so you find that mix. And so we're pretty thorough in our investigation of the recruitment of junior college guys. But I'm a junior college guy myself. So it's something where we're definitely open to it and hoping to get a few more in the door here.
Yeah, because it's I would imagine that the JUCO population, the people that populate those schools, are not really like a good fit typically. Like I'm like thinking like, okay, you need guys that have good grades. So that's like probably cutting out 70%. I don't, maybe California JUCOs are different, but the JUCOs I've recruited, that's cutting out 70% of the kids at the schools. Most of them are like non-qualifiers, let alone like close to a 3.0.
Right.
And then you're looking for guys that probably can afford to go to school, like Whittier. And then if the choice for the athlete coming out of high school was to save all that money, it's probably because Whittier might not be a realistic option financially. So that's like cutting down a certain amount. And then you have guys that are only, like you said, the D1 or bus guys. Like that is like the three main categories that I put JUCO athletes into. It's like it's like those are the reasons to go. And so for them to go 2 years and then find the fit at a school like Whittier, I mean, they must be out there. So tell me about like what that athlete is like.
Yes. So again, the number one thing for him is he has to be comfortable with the fact that you're not a Division I guy. You gave it everything you had, and even gave it 2 extra years past high school, and Division I still isn't knocking on your door. Do you still love the game of football and can't see yourself going to school without it? And so that's really number one for us. And then again, like you said, a guy who academically did the job, because we're also going to need his high school transcripts here. So even if a guy went and knocked it out of the park academically, junior college wise, that's significantly going to help him.
Yeah, and let me pause you for a second because I don't want to get lost on this, but it's important for people to know that that is not necessarily true for a lot of schools. If you're going to go from a JUCO to a Division I school, usually your high school transcript and test scores are wiped out. They're not a part of they're not factored into the decision. But anyway, keep going.
No, yeah, you're correct, and we won't make a decision based on the high school's transcript, but it's something we look at. And again, academically, it's important for us that a guy's a great student, and so certainly, if he's been extremely successful at the junior college level academically, that's going to help him, no doubt. And if a guy winds up getting a 4.0 over 2 years there, earns his AA, then we actually have a program we've started now just this year with junior colleges, much like the California state schools, where there's a guaranteed path to acceptance here at Whittier if they meet this certain path and criteria, regardless of how they did in high school. So it's become a little bit easier this year, provided that a guy follows the path and knocks out what he needs to do.
Yeah, so it's like so you're looking for the person that loves football, really wanted Division I, and so like was willing to give it those next 2 years of a shot because it mattered to them, but it's not D1 or bust. And then additionally, like perhaps someone who almost definitely someone who went to junior college and knocked it out, like academically just was great.
Yes, yeah, he has to have done a great job there in college, and that's something that'll help him out a long way, again, with the academic merit-based piece of it. And obviously, ideally, because we're only going to get a guy most of the time if he used his full 2 years at a junior college, and perhaps you get a guy who after 1 year wants to transfer out. But if he used both of his years in JUCO, then we're going to get him for just 2 years here. And so we want a guy who academically is going to be on pace to graduate in 2 years from here as well, rather than be hanging around for a third year because he was perhaps just taking some fluff courses. And yeah, that's something you find as well is a lot of the JUCOs. You have guys whose transcript is littered with PE classes or football classes. And that's something that, while I love football and I think there's great value in it, it doesn't necessarily help them academically here.
Yeah, I wonder. I do see that a lot, and I wonder what a junior college coach is thinking when they're allowing their athletes to sign up for classes like that. They might be thinking like, this is the athlete's only chance of graduating with their AA degree, and so it's this or nothing's going to work out anyway. Or maybe they're being a little selfish, and they're saying, I just want this guy to be eligible for me for 2 years, even if I know that it's pretty unlikely I'm going to be able to help him to get into a 4-year school after this.
Yeah, obviously, I can't speak for them, but certainly it's something where I just know we don't look at any courses other than kind of your core academic courses here.
Right, which is like what every college is going to do.
Right.
I mean, like they're not looking at those other classes. They're not looking at them. The NCAA for clearinghouse isn't looking at them.
Right.
Any good academic school I've ever worked at, what they do is they take your transcript, they cross off all of the classes that don't count, and then
Exactly.
they add up the A's, the B's, and the C's and calculate their own GPA for you, and then that's what they count. So, um,
Yes.
so the 100% in weightlifting, it doesn't get you very far.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I love weightlifting. It just doesn't hold a lot of water here, or at most schools, as you said.
That actually brings up a good question. I know when we were at Albright together, you were pretty involved in the strength and conditioning program. That I think even continued even to a greater extent after I left. How do you handle that with your team at Whittier?
Yes, yeah, you're spot on. So I was previously when I was at Albright, I was actually the head strength conditioning coach. After you left as well, got fully certified, all that stuff, and got very involved with it. And it's obviously a huge piece of the puzzle because that's where you get to spend a ton of time with the guys, and obviously those hours that you put into the weight room in the spring semester and through the summer are what are going to allow you to be competitive in the fall. So something that I have a passion for, and obviously am hold extremely in high regard for us here. So we don't have any of our football coaches involved in strength conditioning on a day-to-day basis. We have a full strength staff here, which is a great tool to have. And so I meet with our strength staff on a pretty regular basis, and I still have my presence in the weight room, and I'll poke my head in and see how things are going. But we're fortunate to have a good staff of strength coaches who challenge our guys and help them grow from a physical standpoint.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was actually just thinking back that when I started at Albright, they started me right away. I was helping the coach in the weight room, and I was like, I had no business do that. Although I learned a lot and got to the point where I probably I got more comfortable. Um,
Right.
but I got to imagine that if I either faked it really well or players were like, "What is going on right now? Why is this guy telling me to put more weight on the bench or something like that?" Right?
Sure. Sure. Well, and I think that the great thing is that it allows, when you don't have to have your football staff involved in the weight room uh, from a requirement standpoint, or it won't get done. Like it allows us to spend more time in working with our guys out of the weight room. So whether that be game planning or getting ready for practice, or whether it be academically meeting with our guys, whatever it is, it just kind of takes that piece of the puzzle off the table.
Yeah, and I found that as you go up in divisions, that's one of the big differences is you have more and more of that support staff, and so the
Mhm.
football coaches are doing less like kind of extra things, which just allows you to focus your time. I mean, selfishly as a football coach, it allows you to focus on the things that you actually like doing, and at least in my case, and for the players, I think it gives them an advantage because you get more time to have like that more one-on-one interactions. I get more time to develop and put my players in the best position to win, which is ultimately like what they're really interested in, getting better, being in position to win. So, I don't know. I thought that was a big difference in being at a school where you guys have your own strength staff, and I imagine other support. That makes a difference. So it's cool that you guys have that.
Yeah, it's a great advantage for us, no doubt.
Is that typical in your guys' conference, or is that a real difference?
It's school to school. There are several schools that have a separate strength staff like us, and I know there are some that have the football coaches involved, or some other coach on staff who's also doubling as a strength coach, which is, as you mentioned, pretty common, I think, throughout the smaller schools.
Yeah, and I was gonna ask you for your guys' football team, um, how much time are they spending in the weight room in season, off season? Is it same as it was when we were at Albright, or is it pretty different?
Yes, it's about the same as you and I had rolling with the guys there at Albright. So in season, we're working out twice a week. Those are roughly an hour. And then off season, we're working out 4 days a week in the spring, that is, from January through May. And those are going a little bit longer, probably about an hour and a half, because we add in, of course, the speed and agility and conditioning aspect to it, in addition to just the strength training.
And this is kind of a totally different topic, but I'm curious. You're a head coach, and um, I always felt like as an assistant, right? There were guys that I worked with that I wish the head coach would get rid of, right? Just guys that like either didn't act in a way that I thought was great for being a coach, or was lazy or not a good coach, or maybe they're not lazy and they act right, but they're just not good at coaching, right? I've been around all those things, and um, I found that I don't think I've ever been on a staff where a head coach fired an assistant. I think there were situations where assistants, like it happens, I think, in any job where an assistant or someone that works there realizes that there's no path forward because the head coach is basically like, or your boss is like, this is not going well, and you're getting that constant feedback, and so they end up leaving. And I've seen that happen a lot. But I imagine it's got to be hard to do that to someone, to let them go. If you ever been in that position, or how have you handled that or thought about that?
Right. Well, aside from when I took over here, kind of had to clean house from that standpoint. But bringing guys that I know, or guys that I thought were a good fit for where we were going. But from anyone who I hired, I have not had to fire anyone. There have been some that haven't worked out, as you mentioned, and I think really what it comes down to is you try to hire the best person that you can. The guy is going to be the best teacher, best coach, best recruiter possible. But no one ever goes 100% and in their hiring process. And as you do, I think sometimes you wind up with some guys who, I think a lot of times it's prevalent in society today as well, that guys think they're doing a great job at their job, and no one wakes up and goes to bed and says, man, I did a poor job today. I really sucked it up at the office. But uh, truth be told, sometimes that guy's not doing his part. And so I think that's where it's really big. My job as head coach here is not just to help the young men on our team develop to reach their potential, but also our staff to help them grow. And I'm a firm believer in that. As a head coach, I should add some value to every member of our team, and whether it be player, coach, or support staff, whatever it is. And when I stop adding value to them, it's time for them to move on and do something else. But they should be looking to add value as well. But what I'm looking to do is help them develop to become the best coach possible, so they can accomplish whatever their goals are individually in this profession. And as you do that, sometimes you have to be more demanding with some guys than with others. And some guys are a little more high maintenance, and again, maybe unrealistic in what they're achieving on a day-to-day basis. And I think when you put that to people, or they think they're entitled to perhaps a raise, or entitled to have more of a workload and more responsibility. And the answer is just no, that's not going to be a possibility for you here. You need to get better at this and this first. And those guys tend to leave.
Yeah, that does work out that way. So it's like, so you haven't been to the point where you felt like you had to get rid of a staff member. What about a player?
Player, great question. And it's something where I look at it like this. When I recruit a young man into our football program, I'm making a commit. It's a two-way commitment. He's committing and hopefully owns up to it that he's making a 4-year commitment to be the best student athlete he can here at Whittier. I'm making a commitment to him and his family that I'm going to help that young man grow and be the best version of himself that he can as a person, student, athlete. And at that point, we're like family. And it's no different than if you have a child. You can't fire your kid and cut them from the family because they got an F in school, or because they did something the knucklehead like when they were a teenager. You can't say, that's it, you're out of the family. And so that's how I view our football program, is that it's my job to get them to continue to develop and grow. And I can't fire them and just say, that's it, you're gone. It's my job to use whatever it is as a life lesson to help them grow, to help them develop, and again, get them to continue to be better every single day while they're here.
So, as far as you're concerned, there's nothing an athlete could do that would make you want to kick them off the team. It either comes from the athletic department, and as long as the athletic department or the school is keeping them, you'll keep them.
Well, I mean, there are a few, and largely it's illegal stuff.
Yeah.
If some guy is involved, and we haven't had this issue, but certainly our two program rules on when I would cut ties with the guy, or if he doesn't always tell the truth, because that's number one thing I think in any relationship, whether it be friends, family, significant others, coach to player, player to player, player to coach, is you have to have trust. I think that's a foundation of all relationships. So we want to always tell the truth here, and put the program in the best light. And there's a really a zero tolerance for drugs as well. So anything kind of illegal, now that's a different course of action, but many times that's going to result in dismissal from the school anyway.
Yeah, the thing is, you don't really have to think about those cases because the athletic
Exactly.
department or the school really cover those for you. So I mean, it sounds like you have like a philosophy around telling the truth and building trust that you think is foundational. I mean, I got to imagine that 18-year-old, 19-year-olds, they do lie, right? And you got to be catching guys not telling the complete truth all the time. I can't imagine that it's always grounds for dismissal, right? So how do you think? I mean, you have to have had a case. So like, how do you handle that? How do you try to like? Is there like a point in which you would cut off, someone that they're just a liar and can't be trusted, or how do you think about that?
Sure. Well, I think ultimately, and this is why, again, it always comes back to the recruiting process and finding the right people for your program. And one of the things that's extremely important to us is that a guy is very passionate about football. Because if he's passionate about football, then I can have a greater influence on him than if he doesn't care.
Hmm.
And what it comes down to, and again, coming back to trust, as we just talked about, we'll talk about it in terms of a trust account, similar to a bank account, where every action you're doing, you're either depositing trust, or you're withdrawing trust. And if I can't trust you to be in class, if I can't trust you to tell me the truth, then how can I trust you on 4th and 1? I can't put you on the field. And if that guy is passionate about football, he wants to be on the field. And
Hmm.
so he's going to, more times than not, do things the right way. And again, none of us are perfect. We're not asking for perfection from our student athletes. But as a guy's made enough trust deposits, he has a plus account then. And so if he makes a mistake, it doesn't mean that I can't trust that guy. It means he screwed up, and we'll get it right, and work on the next day. But for a freshman coming in, he's got a zero balance. And so if he comes in and he's late to the first team meeting, and then he lies to me about why he did it, well, that guy's starting behind the 8 ball.
Yeah.
And he's already in the negative, and we haven't even gotten rolling yet. But that's going to be a tough and longer path for that guy to get on the field. And again, if he's passionate about football, then he's going to work to make that right. And again, everyone comes to us with different maturity levels, different levels of where they've been as a person as well. Some guys are more developed when they show up here at 18 years old. Some guys have a ways to go. And so you have to take that into account as well. But as long as the guy is committed to getting better and you can see that development, then we're going to be okay. We can work with that.
So what do you think the hardest part is of being a head coach as opposed to being an assistant coach?
Yes, great question. So certainly there's a lot of different challenges to being a head coach. I'd say the number one thing is probably how little time, as opposed to being a position or coordinator, how little time you get to spend with actual football stuff and how much of your time spent with non-true football stuff. and it comes with the chair, obviously. But that's something that I think is unique, and you find out, you hear about it, but when you get that head coaching job and you sit down in that seat, then it's like, all right, we're we're working on this, and this to start the day, and not one of it's about X's and O's.
And what are the things that are filling up your day that aren't X's and O's?
Well, you just, again, you're responsible for literally everyone within your program, from players to coaches, you name it. And so there's just a lot of meetings that you have to take part in that as an assistant or as a coordinator, you don't have to, because you're not in charge of the program. And so there's just a lot of things that you wind up having to sit in on that perhaps as a position or coordinator, you didn't have to.
So it's like more meetings with people within the team, or actually like having to meet with people outside of the team that don't have people, other coaches don't have that responsibility.
I'd say both. It's really both. And whether it be, a young man who I have to meet with because he missed something, whether it be academically or athletically, or again, I have to challenge a young man to help him grow. He's not holding up his end of the bargain, or whatever it is, his commitment that he made to us. You have to meet with players regularly. And there's probably almost every day I'm meeting with players who, when you're a position coach, you're only meeting with your position guys. If you're coaching the DBs as you were, then you're not worried about the running backs. You don't have to meet with those guys for any reason. If I'm an offensive or defensive or special teams coordinator, I don't have to meet with the guys on the other side of the ball, those players. Meeting again just with the coaching staff as well. It's one thing where, as a coordinator, you meet with coaches on your side of the ball, but head coach, obviously, you have to meet with all three phases. And then, of course, all the off-field stuff, whether it be academic meetings, whether it be retention meetings, whether it be admissions meetings. There's just a lot of stuff that comes up.
Yeah, what I remember in my brief stint, which I barely want to count it, but in my brief stint of being a head coach for the Australia team, what I remember really sticking out to me is how much everyone needs your time. Like, you are the person that can solve their problem, and so they have to come to you. And I remember being like, as an assistant coach, it's like, yeah, I need to stop by my head coach's office like every other week with something that I need them for. But then you multiply that by 100, right? Because there's between the staff and the players, like you just have people walking in and out of your office all day. That's your day.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. I love getting in here early. I typically get a pretty early start to my mornings because that's when I can be productive and do stuff that I need to get done, whether it be football related or actual on field, I should say, or something else. Because, like you said, just during the day, I mean, my door is almost always open. And as it is, people are coming in and out pretty regularly. So it's something where you think you have all this time and then it gets taken.
And are you doing the offensive coordinator job as well?
Yes. So the past two seasons, 17 and 18, I was the primary play caller for us offensively as well.
And how how do you balance that? Or yeah, I guess first, how do you balance that with the other responsibilities?
Well, fortunately, I think I have some great assistants offensively as well who help us out and from a game planning standpoint. And everyone has their own responsibilities as far as game planning and scout and report, and they do a great job of being detailed with that information. And then again, the good thing that I have going from a professional standpoint is that I have nothing but time right now. And so it's something that allows me to spend the time on what's needed. And certainly right now where we're at, that's me handling the offensive play calling duties.
So instead of like a lot of head coaches, they have head coaching responsibilities and husband and dad responsibilities. You just substitute the offensive coordinator for that second job.
For the most part, yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean that is a fun job calling the plays, and I think head coaches really struggle with giving that up because it's hard to do both well. But D3 programs, a lot of times you don't have much of a choice because you don't have it's hard to keep an experienced staff at a Division 3 school because of the salaries and all that. What are you guys running on offense?
Offensively, we're really a multiple style. We're going to change up personnel's formations. you name it, trade shifts, motions, kind of depends on what our roster is looking like that year. So allows us to be multiple, but primarily we're zone and gap or power concepts, play action package off each one of them. And then we have a handful of screens we'll employ, and then some quick pass game and some 5-step stuff as well. And we'll get into some of your choice, or as everyone's calling them, RPOs now, whatever you want to call that as well. But we really have the ability to run just about anything. We can kind of tailor make it to what our personnel dictates us to be successful at.
And are you guys out of the gun and running a bunch of read, or are you guys mostly under center?
We'll get under center, but we're spending more time in the gun now.
You and everyone else?
Just about.
What's your conference like? Is it a bunch of spread teams, or is it a lot of power teams?
Most of the teams are spread-ish, and then there's probably one team that is a little bit more your 2-3 tight ends, kind of that personnel package. But yeah, most of the teams are spreading it out somewhat.
I see. Do you what's your philosophy behind the offense and defenses that you choose to run? How do you come up with that?
Great question. It's something where I want to do something that allows us to have some flexibility to take advantage of what we can do well. And as you know, having coached, it changes year to year. There are some years where perhaps offensively you're returning some all-conference skill position guys, and up front you're a little young, or perhaps you're returning all your linemen, but you got a rookie signal caller or whatever it may be. So I think the flexibility is the key. Some years, maybe defensively, you have some guys who can excel at man coverage, and some years, perhaps their skill set are better suited towards some zone concepts. So it really just kind of depends on what you can do, and that changes year to year. So I think having the flexibility rather than sticking the old square peg through the round hole, and this is what we do, it can really be helpful for us.
Yeah, I find defensively, the ability of your corners drive what you can run.
Yes.
And offensively, it's your quarterback, right? I mean, like, you're lying a little bit, but really your quarterback. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, I think in the secondary, it's key. What do we have? Do we have safeties who can cover a ton of field space? And do we have corners who can run with guys, or are they physical corners, or whatever it might be? I think part of it too, and I think it happens across all levels of football, is you can never have enough D linemen. Those guys up front are extremely hard to find. And yeah, I don't know if anyone really outside of Alabama is ever really pumped about the number of D linemen they're involved with in the recruiting process. So it's something where that can have an effect too. And I think that you're finding more and more teams, at least in our conference, are kind of going to 3 true down linemen, and then finding a different way to bring a 4th or 5th guy who has a different skill set, because the true D linemen are just becoming more and more rare to find. And then offensively, absolutely. I mean, ultimately, it's going to be your quarterback who is the guy who dictates what you can do well.
Yeah, I always thought about that as a corners coach. Like, if you're a D-line coach, your 8th best player is getting into the game and playing, meaningful number of snaps. I was like, if my 8th best corner was ever going into the game, I would be horrified.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like but that's what you're dealing with when you're a D-line coach. You just got to coach. You got to coach them all. You got to get like a little bit out of even the guys that are ways away from really being able to help. You got to get some snaps out of them and give other guys rest. And that is just like that is brutal. D-line coaches have a different job.
Absolutely. No, you nailed that one. And certainly their grade sheet's a little more filled out than coaching some other positions as well, with all those dudes getting on the field.
Oh yeah, they have a longer list of names. That is definitely true. Oh man, I wanted to ask you. Now it's blanking on me, but so you guys are multiple on offense. Defensively, you were a defensive coordinator. How involved do you stay with that?
I stay pretty involved. Fortunately, we have a defensive coordinator who I actually coached with at Albright after you had left, but a guy who I trust, and we have a great defensive staff as well. So I'm very involved with it, and I'm not coaching a position defensively, obviously, but I'm still meeting a couple times with our defensive coordinator per week and going over things. And the great thing is too, I think, and it's something that is really a must to be on my staff, is I want guys with no ego, and it doesn't matter whose idea it is. And so I'll poke my head into the defensive staff room all the time. But hey, guys, like I saw this on film, or hey, I was watching. I don't get to watch practice film with our defensive staff, but I'll watch the film and kind of go in there for a few minutes to sum it up and say, hey, I saw this or that. And, it's one of the things that it gets me about our profession is we tend to focus on the negative, right? You have 10 plays and one went wrong, you watch that wrong play first. So I'll go in with kind of some things, or poke some holes in some ideas that we have and whatever else it is. But so I stay pretty involved.
I've always found that teams that I've worked on, it's been hard for a coordinator and a head coach to work together in that way. That relationship always seems strained to me because the head coach might suggest something and the coordinator feels a pressure like they pretty much have to do it. That's like their boss telling them what to do. Um, but I imagine the head coach really doesn't want it to be that way. Although if they don't do it and it doesn't go well, it's like they won't forget it. So how do you, as a head coach, make that work, that relationship?
Sure, I think it's you're right, kind of a touchy thing that can happen because the coordinator on whatever side he's spending all his time working on that and getting that side of the ball ready, and the head coach who's not involved with that side full time, and he just comes in and says, hey, let's do this, or on the sideline, let's make this adjustment, whatever it is. And it's kind of like, come on, dude, really? But yeah, it's something where I think we all have to understand first that we're all on the same team. We're all trying to make things work for our betterment. And that, hey, a lot of times if I'm going to say something, it's because I've been in this situation, I've been in this experience, and I've seen this happen, and this has worked for me in the past. I'm not just spitballing or throwing ideas out there. Hey, let's give this a shot. If I say something, it's because I'm pretty sure this will get the job done if something we're struggling with, or something that could help us from a game plan standpoint.
And so if you're suggesting something, is your expectation that your coordinator will do it, or is your expectation that your coordinator will consider it and make their own decision? Um, how do you what is your expectation?
I'd say my expectation is that it's going to be heavily considered, and if not followed through with, then there better be something better in place that I'm going to need explained to me.
Right. So like I think that is the hard spot that you are in as a coordinator is that it's not even if you think that you might have a better idea, it's not even worth doing because as you know, like who knows what idea will ultimately end up working and not working. It's all kind of, it's not a crapshoot, but it's,
Right.
you don't know, and you'd rather fail with the head coach's idea than your own having gone against them. It's just not worth it as a coordinator. So I would imagine that as a head coach, you'd want them to be able to stand up and like not fight you, but at least like help to come to a good like conclusion together on really the best approach forward. Um, so I imagine that's hard to do.
Absolutely. And I think I like to think anyway. I guess we'd have to ask my staff, but I think I'm pretty open to ideas, concepts, whatever they might be. But again, it's just something where you have to have a reason for it. And no one of us knows everything, obviously. And that's why we're all continually trying to grow and learn and develop in our profession also. But I may not know something, or someone else from another background may have another experience. And so I like to think I'm pretty open to new things. But again, sometimes we're going to need to be convinced of that as well.
Yeah. Well, I think that is the balance you're trying to strike, being both assertive and open-minded at the same time to
Absolutely.
getting to the best decision. I mean, that's what you said. You said ultimately it's one team trying to accomplish one goal, and there's different ways to get there, and some are better than others, and just trying to struggle through that together and struggle through it well.
Right. 100%.
So, I guess before we cut loose and call it a day, I want to know what advice would you give to a student athlete or a parent of one or a high school coach trying to advise someone on how to go through the recruiting process? What do you think that people aren't doing that they should be doing?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, just briefly, as we kind of talked about earlier, get the best grades you can. It's going to have as many options as possible for you if you're doing the job academically. But as far as I think you're asking about like getting yourself recruited, things like that. So to get to that standpoint, again, kind of find schools that fit what you're looking for if you haven't heard from them, and find out which schools you may be suited for. And I think that that's a big thing too. A lot of people aren't realistic with what they're capable of doing, and then identify those schools and reach out to them. It's something where I love getting an email from a guy, and make it personalized too, and make sure when you personalize it that it's right. If you're sending it to me, say, "Hey, Coach Neale, I'm interested in Whittier College," not "Hey, Coach Jones, I'm interested in School X." Because sometimes you get that stuff from just the mass mail merge things. So drop a personalized email out, and whatever it may be, and reach out to that coach or to that staff, and know who you're reaching out to as well. Because I think a lot of times what happens is, and again, as head coach, like I get a ton of emails every day. My inbox just gets flooded, and the head coach isn't recruiting every school out there. And certainly I'm actually out on the road. I recruit, but not all head coaches do. So find out as much as you can who's responsible for recruiting you at that school you're interested in, and again, get them all your information. Also, be as thorough as possible in everything from your social media to your film that you send out. I mean, there's nothing I love seeing more than kind of a very mature social media where it has a guy's name and has his school, his position, his GPA, all of his things are right there on his profile or on his film as well at the intro. List all that stuff so that a coach doesn't have to wonder, because a lot of times it's like, oh man, I love this film. What's the kid's GPA, or how do I contact him? Throw your email or cell phone or whatever it is in there so that people can get in touch with you. I think that that's huge. And when you have something that, hey, my Twitter handle is Beast, that's great, Beast. I don't even know what school you go to. So, and a lot of times I get the email too that quite literally it won't even have a subject, and all it'll have in the bulk of the email is just a link to their huddle. That's it. Not, "Hey coach," just huddle.com/whoever kid. Man, be a little more personal in the approach. And I think when you do that, I know that I'm going to, and I feel most coaches that I know as well are going to at least give a look to an email that's certainly been something that a young man has put some time and effort into. "Hey, Coach Neale, I'm interested in Whittier College. I'd love to be considered for your 2019 class, whatever it is. Here's a little bit about myself." Well, I'm going to read that email. I'm going to click on that link.
Yeah, I find that that's feedback I get a lot from Division III coaches is send me an email, but make it actually a real email that shows me that you're interested. I think there's something about the Division III recruiting process where you just want to start with guys that are serious about maybe going to Whittier College one day, and that makes them worth 10 times the amount of time for you, because you're not just like shooting, you're not just like going out there and watching every huddle film. You're watching someone's film who you already know like has spent the time and is at least interested in Whittier College, and wasn't just like a coach's name email in a spreadsheet that got sent to mail merge to.
Absolutely. And sometimes you see in the address up top, it'll have 400 coaches' email addresses there.
Right.
And it's like, all right, dude, come on. Who didn't you send this to? It's got everyone from us to USC and everyone in between. And it's like, all right, who are you interested in? Because certainly you sent it to every coach in the country. So,
Yeah.
and that's a bit like you said too. Like if it's a kid from across the country, right? If he's out east like you are there, are you really interested in Whittier? You know where we're at? And a lot of times I'll follow up with a guy, just quick email. Hey, yeah, are you interested in Whittier? What do you know about us? Oh, well, where are you guys? Well, you should have answered that question before you sent it to me. You should know we're in Southern California at least. So yeah, just do your diligence, and be professional as a recruit as well.
Yeah, it's like that mass approach I think really turns off a lot of D3 coaches. Um,
Absolutely.
and I think for D2 and D1 coaches, I think that I don't know D2, but I would say D1, I think like either one of those approaches is probably not going to go that well.
Right.
I always say like have your high school coach send the email to a Division I coach, or have them call or text a D1 coach, because the amount of mail that's coming into the D1 coaches is just it's too much. But they're always going to look at something, or I think mostly going to look at something that comes from a high school coach for sure. Um,
Absolutely.
but you touched on something else there that I think like is totally reasonable advice, and I think like everyone could agree to it, but it's probably hard for athletes to follow practically, which is to be realistic. At least I heard that in what you said. How do you practically put yourself in the shoes? You're a senior in high school or junior in high school, and you're good. Like you start for your team, and your team's really good, and you got selected all conference, and you're pretty fast and whatever. Like you've always been like one of the best athletes that you've known. How do you know if you're going to USC or Whittier or nowhere or somewhere? How do you know?
Absolutely. That's a great question, and one that there's not a 100% answer to, obviously. But that being said, I think the recruiting process is getting so early nowadays as well, with guys being offered sophomore, junior year. The early sign date obviously coming up here in a couple weeks now. Guys taking their official visits in the summer months or late spring months, whatever you want to call them there as well. Their junior heading into senior year. So it, for the most part, guys who are getting full scholarships are getting them earlier than ever. And I think the biggest thing is if you don't have a full scholarship offer and you're a junior and heading into your senior year, just keep your options open. And I'll be the first guy to say, if you wind up getting a full scholarship somewhere, man, take that scholarship and go, and best of success to you. And I'll wish you nothing but the best on the way out the door. But keep your options open, and certainly then you can find the one that is the best fit for you, because there are a lot of good schools, a lot of good football programs at all levels, and places that may be a great fit for you that you just either aren't aware of or you're not willing to explore for whatever reason. So until those full offers start rolling in, just keep your options open and explore a school to see if it could be the right fit for you.
Yeah, I think that is stuff like I always tell guys like if you don't have two scholarship offers, you have to have two. If you don't have two scholarship offers, you should be finding the schools that you like the most at each division level, right? You should like pick a couple and like start pursuing them, and then I think like you will start to feel. I don't know how much you can be that reasonable for yourself, but like you will start to feel if you're pursuing schools what level like is appropriate for you. Um, but I also find that like there's like this other part of it, which is there are so many schools, there's so many athletes that they could send their film to every Division 1 school, and one of them would like them, or a couple of them would like them. And so like, how do you know if you just haven't reached out to the right school yet, or if you're just not if you're not a D1 guy? Like I don't know how to get athletes to figure that out.
Yeah, and I don't know that, again, there's a solid rule to that. But again, if you're not getting any sniffs from any scholarship schools, if you're not getting out here in Southern California, if you're not getting talked to about potentially even being a preferred walk-on somewhere within the Pac-12 or Mountain West or whatever else 1AA levels out here, then it's going to be tough for you to hold on to that desire to be a Division 1 football player and wait for that scholarship. And as we know, boards blow up all the time, and after the first sign date, your schools will kind of regroup and figure out who they planned on and who they need to go back on, whatever else it may be at their individual institution. But for the most part, by this time of year especially, I think you have some great advice there. Start exploring some schools and see what could be the best option for you.
Yeah, I guess that's true. It's like even if you would only get the scholarship from the one or two of the schools, there's at least dozens of others that like have you on their maybe lists, and like
Right.
enough on their maybe list where you are getting recruited by them even if you haven't been offered by them. And so like if you can't get onto someone's maybe list, meaning like that they're calling you and they're like directly reaching out to you on social media and I guess texting, and like if they're not like bringing out that communication at least every now and again, at least a couple of times like a season, like even every 4 weeks or something that's like they're keeping you alive because they can see a scenario where they might one day offer you a scholarship letter. If you're not even getting that, then I think like you're probably too far away. Um, probably the bigger problem comes from the guys that are getting that and are confusing it for I am right around the corner for a scholarship offer, when
Sure.
really you are the 5% scenario where the things really fall apart. Or even like it could happen the other way where an athlete is kind of like far down on the list, but I'm going to watch the athlete's senior year film, and the senior year film sometimes it comes back and it surprises you to the upside, and then all of a sudden you're recruiting a guy that you weren't, that serious about before, and you're offering him a scholarship. So it can happen that way
Right.
too, um but I think that is the deal, is like that's the hard part. And I think a lot of athletes confuse that interest for close to an offer, and then they're like, well, I don't have to bother with, USC is going to offer me, right? They
Right.
haven't yet. They're going to offer me, so I don't have to bother, and that's the big mistake, and that's when you have to really explore. Because I'm sure you guys get guys that get recruited by USC, but like there it's a pretty loose version of the word recruiting.
Right. Yeah, it's always kind of what you decide is being recruited. Did you get one letter? Did you get an email or whatever the case may be? So certainly an individual decision for each young man. But I think a couple things. One, it's always greater to have more options than too few, because then ultimately you can choose the one that's right for you. And secondly, you want to go someplace that wants you. I think is big. That school that is barely calling you, even if you can wind up going out for the football team there, they don't want you. You're just a body. So it's about going to the place that wants you and that you can be a good fit at. And again, you can be a 4 or potentially 5-year member of that school, that campus, and that football program as well, because you want to try to avoid as much as possible, in my opinion, that whole transfer thing, and that'll set you back academically, and find that right fit right out of the gate.
Yeah, and um, that actually brings me back to your personal experience. You guys, you went to, like you said, you went to junior college, and then from what I remember, you might have to fill in some of the gaps here in my memory, but you went to Southeast Missouri State after that, right?
Southwest Missouri State.
Southwest
Now,
Missouri State.
yeah,
Okay.
it's just Missouri
Now,
State
yeah,
now.
now it's just Missouri State. Okay, that's right. All
Correct.
right, so you went there, which as a California kid must have been a bit of a shock. And
Yes, absolutely.
so you went there, and I believe that they had you on scholarship, or at least something of that nature. And from what I remember, like you did not have a positive experience there. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. And what do you think you did wrong, or would you do differently now, knowing all the things that you know now, to make that have turned out better?
Sure. Well, yeah, I did. You're right. I went the junior college route. I missed the majority of my senior year due to injury, and as a result, went to the junior college level. And after that was kind of figuring out where to go, which opens up a whole nother. I think that's one of the tricky things about going the 2-year route is you go through the recruiting process then again, and didn't know a whole lot about the recruiting process myself at the time either, and wasn't even aware of, say, Whittier or the SCIAC conference being even around, and it hadn't even been contacted or known of any of those schools that are currently in our conference. So was exploring options that were outside of the area, obviously, and yeah, wound up going somewhere which was a fine football program, no doubt about it, but perhaps not the best fit for me, and think probably would have had a better experience at a school similar to probably where we're at here in the SCIAC, but didn't know that it was even an option at that point.
What do you think it was that made you not know that it was an option?
I don't know, and again, this was years ago now, but I mean,
let,
it's
let me count the years.
yeah, it's like 20-ish years or so, but I don't know if schools just weren't recruiting I mean, the junior college I went to, Grossmont College in San Diego. We were very successful at the time, and we were putting a lot of guys out, but no one on the team was even being recruited by anyone in the SCIAC. So I don't know if schools just in our conference were recruiting down in the JUCO levels, or what it was, but for whatever reason, I just had no knowledge. And I think it's something too, being born and raised in San Diego. There is only there are only 2 4-year schools playing football in San Diego. You have San Diego State, obviously, and University of San Diego, and that's it. So even though the SCIAC, as close as we are, roughly 2 hours, depending where you live and which school you go to here, 2-hour drive or so, and of course, depending on traffic. But you also don't know anything about them as a San Diego kid, and so you could have mentioned any of those schools that are in our conference, and I hadn't heard of them at that point. And I think none of my teammates had either. So it was just kind of a unique situation there.
Gosh, it's like it is so often that the story I'm told is I went to that school to play football because that's the coach that called me. It is like I feel like that is the story. That is like why people and like I wish I knew that more as a coach when I was recruiting to know
Yeah,
like how big of an impact. I mean, ultimately, I guess like every athlete that went to the school I was coaching at pretty much went there because I called them. Um,
sure.
so there is like I guess that was always real to some extent, but it just feels like athletes and parents, they have no idea what the options are, and so they just kinda, like they let their options get filled by whatever people leave messages for them on the machine.
Absolutely. No, that's a great point. And I think a big thing is too, as looking back as a high school and or junior college recruit is utilize your entire coaching staff as well, because it may not be just your head coach, but some of your assistant coaches may have gone to a school or played collegiately somewhere where they think you'd be a good fit, but just because you play wide receiver and the D line coach in your high school, you don't talk to a whole lot, you're not around him very often, but he may be like, hey, dude, you'd be a great fit at this school or to play in this conference. And I go, really, where's that? And so yeah, you see it happen every year. You're exactly right. It's just, yeah, they called me or coach recommended this school, and that was it.
Yeah, I wonder if there's any good resources out there for athletes, to just, like, type in what they're like in some way, like, select some options, and then for it to spit out some schools to at least get started with to help them narrow down their search and, like, send those personalized emails to those few places, just to help them direct because there's just gotta be so many schools that they've never heard of that is probably the best fit for every athlete is probably a school they never heard of, and
Yes.
might not ever hear of ever, right?
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, that was kind of my experience. It was, my position coach in junior college. He gave me a list. He coached all over the place, and he gave me a list of like every NCAA school and checked off like five. And he's like, these are the five that I think you could play at, and that I know some people at, and we can get the ball rolling. I'm like, okay, cool, let's do it. And that was it. So I think, of course, now with the internet, great invention, right? That you can get out there and you can do a lot more research on your own individually and see some things that perhaps I wouldn't have had access to back in the dark ages. But it's something where be proactive about it and do your research, talk to people and talk to guys who've gone out and gone to school and come back, because a lot of times you wind up as well as you know, the vast majority of young men who start playing college football don't finish. So there's a good chance that someone on your high school team went away to a school and came back. Well, what did he learn? What did he like? What didn't he like? And why didn't it work out for him there? And how can I grow from his experience so I don't make that same mistake and be at a place that I'm going to be comfortable at for 4 years? And I think, as you mentioned too, it happens a lot, specifically, I think, with Southern California kids. You go away somewhere else and it sounds good. And then you come back for Christmas, over Christmas break, and man, it's 70 degrees and you barely got out of the airport because there was ice on the ground. And then a couple weeks later, you're going back to it and do some winter conditioning out in it as well. And it's like, man, what the heck am I doing out here? So, find that best fit for you.
Yeah, it's one of the unfortunate things about this podcast is the people that are listening to it in a lot of ways are the people that least need the advice, right? Because like they're the ones that are being proactive, right? The
Sure.
advice is to be proactive and to learn and to get what you should be getting out of it, and this will be helpful to them. But to the extent that they can talk to their friends and get more people to be proactive and learn what it is that you are looking for and what it is that you like and building those connections with the coaches at those schools, that's what you need to do to get the best experience.
Absolutely.
Well, cool, Mike. Thanks so much. It was awesome having you on, and we will do this again.
My pleasure. Thank you, Nate, and look forward to it.
All right, go Poets.
Thank you.
All right,
Bye.
bye. Mike's a great coach and a better guy. I really loved the time I spent coaching with him. And when he got the opportunity to rebuild the Whittier program, Be honest, I was tempted to join them. They're overcoming a lot, but I really believe with Mike at the helm, his players and coaches are going to be working hard and having fun. But thanks for listening. And if you find our content valuable, share it. Support from you guys is what makes it possible to even continue to provide this helpful and free content to all of our listeners. Until next time, bye.